The rain had not stopped for 3 days when the stranger came to Whitmore Hall. Duke Alistair Whitmore stood by the window of his study, watching water run down the old glass in thin silver lines. The fields beyond were gray and soaked, and the trees bent low under the weight of the storm. He liked days like this. They matched the quiet, heavy feeling he had carried inside him since his wife died 2 years ago. The house was large and full of servants, yet to him, it always felt empty. He had told everyone, more than once, that he would never marry again. His sisters had stopped trying to introduce him to young women at parties. His mother had given up sending him letters about eligible ladies in London. Even his closest friend, Captain Edmund Hayes, had learned not to mention the subject. Alistair had built a quiet, careful life around his grief, and he intended to keep it that way until the end of his days. So when his butler, Mr. Finch, knocked on the study door that evening with an unusual tightness in his voice, Alistair felt a small flicker of irritation rather than curiosity. "Your Grace," Finch said, "there is a woman at the door. She says she must speak with you. She has a child with her. Send her away. It is late, and the weather is terrible. She insists it cannot wait, Your Grace. She says it concerns a matter of great importance to your family." Alistair sighed and set down his book. He walked to the entrance hall, prepared to dismiss whatever business this stranger thought she had with him. But when he saw her standing in the doorway, soaked from the rain, holding the hand of a small girl, something in his chest tightened unexpectedly. The woman was perhaps 30 years old, with tired eyes and damp brown hair clinging to her face. Her clothes were modest but clean, the kind worn by someone who had once known better days. Beside her stood a little girl, no older than 4, wrapped in a shawl too large for her small body. The child's eyes were wide and curious, looking up at the grand house as though she had never seen anything like it. "Your Grace," the woman said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am sorry to come unannounced, and at such an hour, but I have nowhere else to go, and what I must tell you cannot wait any longer." Alistair frowned. The name meant nothing to him. "I do not believe we have met, Mrs. Hayes." "We have not properly. But you knew my sister, years ago, when you traveled through the South before your marriage." Eleanor paused, glancing down at the child beside her, before meeting his eyes again. "This is Mary. She is your daughter." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. For a moment, Alistair could not speak. The hall around him seemed to grow very quiet, the sound of rain against the windows, the only thing he could hear. "That is not possible," he said finally, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "I understand this is difficult to believe," Eleanor said. "I would not have come if I had any other choice. But I am asking only for shelter, for a few days, while I explain everything. After that you may do as you wish." Alistair studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. He found only weariness, and something that looked like quiet desperation. He looked down at the child, who was staring up at him now, with curious, unblinking eyes. There was something familiar in the shape of her face, though he could not say what it was. Against every instinct telling him to send them away, he found himself stepping back from the door. "Come in," he said. "Out of the rain at least. We will speak further once you have dried yourselves and eaten something warm." Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, hurried to prepare rooms and bring blankets, casting curious glances at the unexpected guests. Alistair retreated to his study, his mind racing. He poured himself a drink he did not really want, and stared into the fire, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He remembered the woman Eleanor had mentioned, his sister, vaguely. Years ago, before he met his late wife, he had traveled abroad for several months, staying in a quiet town in the South. He had been younger then, less guarded, and there had been a woman he spent time with during those weeks. He had not thought of her in years. Could this be true? Could he truly have a daughter he never knew existed? He did not sleep well that night. The next morning, Alistair found Eleanor in the breakfast room, watching Mary eat porridge with great concentration. The child had insisted on holding the spoon herself, and most of the porridge ended up near her mouth rather than in it. Despite himself, Alistair felt a small smile tug at the corner of his lips, before he caught himself and straightened his expression. "I would like an explanation," he said, taking a seat across from Eleanor. "A full one." Eleanor nodded and folded her hands in her lap. "My sister, Catherine, met you many years ago, when you traveled through our town. She never told anyone who Mary's father was, not even our parents. She made me promise to keep the secret, unless circumstances forced my hand. Where is your sister now?" Eleanor's eyes grew sad. "She passed away last winter. A fever took her, very suddenly. Before she died, she told me the truth and made me promise to find you, but only if I had no other way to care for Mary." "And do you?" Alistair asked. "Have no other way?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I have been unwell myself," she admitted. "The physician says it may be serious. I have spent what little money we had on treatments that have not helped. I did not want to come here. I know what people will think, what they will say about Catherine, about me, but Mary deserves better than what I can give her now." Alistair watched her carefully. There was no anger in her voice, no demand for money or position, only a quiet, painful honesty that was difficult to dismiss. Still, he had learned through his years as a duke that people often had hidden reasons for what they said and did. "I will need proof," he said. "I am sorry to ask it, but you must understand my position." "I understand completely," Eleanor replied. "I expected nothing less." Alistair sent for his trusted friend, a physician named Dr. Whitfield, who arrived within 2 days. The doctor examined Mary carefully, noting small details about her features, comparing them quietly to a portrait of Alistair's late father that hung in the hallway. He spoke privately with Eleanor about her sister's history and the timing of events. While they waited for the doctor's assessment, life at Whitmore Hall began to shift in small, unexpected ways. Mary, it turned out, did not like vegetables of any kind, and would push them around her plate with great determination rather than eat them. She loved the 2 large hunting dogs that lived near the stables, and would spend hours trying to teach them tricks they had no interest in learning. She had a habit of wandering into the library and falling asleep among the books, even ones far too advanced for her age, as though simply being near them brought her comfort. Alistair found himself watching her more than he intended to. There was something about the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, or the stubborn set of her jaw when she did not get her way, that reminded him faintly of his own mother. He told himself he was only being cautious, observing for the sake of confirming or denying her claim. But some nights, after Mary had been put to bed, he caught himself smiling at the memory of something silly she had said or done that day. Eleanor, too, became someone he found himself thinking about more than he expected. She did not flatter him or seek his attention the way some women in his circle did. She spoke plainly, asked for nothing beyond what was necessary, and spent her days caring for Mary with a patience that spoke of deep love. When her illness made her tired, she never complained, only rested quietly, and continued on as soon as she was able. One afternoon, Alistair found her sitting in the garden, watching Mary chase butterflies near the rose bushes. He sat down beside her without being invited, something he rarely did with anyone. "You have given up a great deal to bring her here," he said. Eleanor watched her daughter for a long moment before answering. "I gave up my pride mostly. People will talk, they already do, I imagine, but Mary's future matters more to me than what anyone thinks of me. That is a kind of courage, Alistair said quietly. I do not think I appreciated it until now. Eleanor turned to look at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. You have been kinder than I expected, Your Grace. I thought you might turn us away the moment you opened the door. I considered it, he admitted, for perhaps 3 seconds. Then I saw her face, and I could not do it. They sat together in comfortable silence after that, watching Mary laugh as a butterfly landed briefly on her outstretched hand before fluttering away. Alistair felt something shift inside him, a small crack in the wall he had built around his heart since his wife's death. Dr. Whitfield's assessment, when it finally came, was as certain as such things could be without modern scientific testing. The resemblance, the timing, and Eleanor's detailed and consistent account all pointed strongly toward Mary being Alistair's biological daughter. He sat with this news for several days, turning it over in his mind during long walks across his estate. He thought about his late wife, about the promise he had made to himself never to open his heart again. He thought about the quiet, careful life he had built, free from the risk of further loss. And then he thought about Mary's laughter echoing through the halls of Whitmore, and Eleanor's quiet strength, and he realized that life had a way of arriving uninvited, much like the storm that had brought them to his door. He called Eleanor to his study one evening, the fire crackling warmly between them. I believe you, he said simply. Mary is my daughter. I will acknowledge her properly, and she will want for nothing as long as I live. Relief washed visibly over Eleanor's face, tears gathering in her eyes that she quickly blinked away. Thank you, Your Grace. I cannot express how much this means. There is something else, Alistair continued, his voice less certain now. I find that my feelings toward you have changed since you arrived. I did not expect this, and I confess it troubles me somewhat. I made a promise to myself that I would not love again. Eleanor's expression grew careful, guarded. You owe me nothing beyond what you have already offered, Your Grace. Please do not feel obligated. It is not obligation, Alistair interrupted gently. It is something else entirely, something I am still trying to understand myself. Their conversation was interrupted before it could continue further, as a letter arrived bearing troubling news. A man named Mr. Carow, who Eleanor revealed had once sought her hand in marriage before being firmly refused, had somehow learned of her presence at Whitmore Hall. He threatened to spread rumors questioning Mary's legitimacy and Eleanor's character throughout society, hoping to force Eleanor into desperation and dependence on him once again. Eleanor grew pale reading the letter. I should leave, she said quickly. I do not want to bring trouble to your household, or to Mary's future. Running will only feed the rumors, Alistair said firmly. We will face this together, openly and honestly. He spent the following days arranging matters carefully. He consulted with his lawyer to ensure Mary's position as his daughter would be legally protected, regardless of what gossip might spread. He spoke quietly with trusted friends in society, those whose opinions carried weight, explaining the situation honestly before rumors could distort it. Then, at a gathering hosted by his own sister, attended by much of London's society, Alistair made his decision known publicly. He stood before the assembled guests, Mary's small hand held firmly in his own, and announced without hesitation or shame that she was his daughter, and that he intended to raise her as his own in every respect. A murmur swept through the room, some surprised, some clearly disapproving, but Alistair did not waver. Life rarely follows the paths we expect, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. I once believed my family was complete, and then lost. I have since learned that family can also be found, unexpectedly, and I will not turn away from it out of fear of what others might say. Mr. Carow, present among the guests, and clearly hoping to see Eleanor humiliated, found his planned scheme falling apart before him. with Alistair's public acknowledgement removing any scandal to exploit, and several influential guests expressing quiet admiration for the Duke's honesty, Caro's threats lost all their power. He left the gathering quietly, his plans abandoned. In the weeks that followed, Whitmore Hall slowly transformed. What had once been a quiet, lonely house, filled gradually with the sounds of a child's laughter, with Eleanor's gentle presence overseeing the household with growing confidence as her health, with proper care, began to improve. Alistair found himself smiling more often, his careful reserve softening day by day. One evening, as autumn began turning the leaves to gold outside the windows, Alistair found Eleanor in the garden once more, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have given much thought to what I said before," he began, standing beside her, "about my feelings, and the promise I made to myself." Eleanor turned to face him, waiting. "I find that some promises are meant to be broken," he continued, "when something greater arrives to take their place. I did not expect to love again. I certainly did not expect to find a daughter and a companion arriving together on a stormy evening. But I have come to believe that life sometimes gives us exactly what we need, even when we are not looking for it." He knelt before her, taking her hand gently in his own. "Eleanor, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not out of obligation, or for Mary's sake alone, though I love her dearly, but because I have come to love you, for who you are." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will." Their wedding took place the following spring, in the small chapel near Whitmore Hall, surrounded by close family and friends, rather than the grand spectacle society might have expected from a duke. Mary, now 5 years old, walked ahead of her mother down the aisle, scattering flower petals with great seriousness, occasionally pausing to wave enthusiastically at the hunting dogs who had been allowed to watch from a respectful distance. As Alistair watched Eleanor approach, dressed simply but beautifully, he felt none of the heaviness that had defined his life for the past 2 years. Instead, he felt something he had thought lost forever: hope, warm and steady, for the family he had not known he was missing until they arrived at his door on a rainy evening, uninvited, but exactly when he needed them most. After the ceremony, as the small gathering celebrated in the warm spring sunshine, Alistair lifted Mary onto his shoulders, laughing as she squealed with delight, while Eleanor watched them both with a smile that held all the quiet joy of a life finally settling into place. The promise he had once made to never marry again had indeed been broken, but in its place stood something far more precious than the careful solitude he had once protected so fiercely: a family, found unexpectedly, and loved completely.